So I will say that song is probably the most controversial thing I've done maybe in this entire class. I try not to get too political on the show or tell you what way my ideological leanings are, although you can probably guess where I kind of stand on most issues. However, I literally was looking through every single song I had, and nothing fit. Nothing, everything that I play usually is like peppy, upbeat, trying to get you guys excited at least about learning about something new maybe, and I couldn't think of anything other than just playing this theme song. The theme song for the Imperial March, like, it's just the epitome of evil. And I wouldn't even call this whole administration evil, although they do things that are pretty horrific. I would say, though, that, like, I just don't even know how to describe, like, this whole thing. Like, I really don't. This is going to be the most frustrating video to make because instead of just going through who these cabinet secretaries are, I really can't tell you that. I got to tell you who is the most important in Trump's, circle, an inner circle. Those are the people who matter the most, because really these cabinet secretaries who he has don't matter. I think this whole cabinet is just so stupid. I just really do. It's not the people necessarily that are around him, but just everything that happens. I'm recording this on the Thursday before you guys see this, so this is the 17th that I'm recording it. Of course, there's like two other people who are probably going to be fired in the next probably couple hours. We already had one of the secretaries resign, the Secretary of Energy. He's a part of this whole Ukraine scandal. And then the chief of staff is about to maybe be fired too, because he just completely admitted that they did a quid pro quo with Ukraine. I like the level of just frustration that I have right now. It's like not a great time for me to do this video, but I don't have any other time. I really don't. I need to do it now. So I'm sorry to start this off. I know this is like completely different from any of the other lectures that we've done, but this one is so frustrating to me, and I do not know how else to express that. So I'm going to talk about the executive branch and who is in it. Honestly, I'm just going to name off some people right now and some issues that we have with the executive branch, which are so vastly numerous that I really don't even know how to approach it. So I'm just going to tell you guys things that are going on, people that you should be aware of, people that are in Trump's inner circle that mean the most to him, and that does not include many of his cabinet secretaries. Some of them have no real role other than just being kind of just the head of their organization that they're a part of. Some of them mean more to others than to Trump. He takes a lot of advice from some of them. So I'll talk about a few of them that are really, really important. So to start, we have Mike Pence. Mike Pence actually just today ceasefire, which wasn't really a ceasefire, from Trump's decision to pull out of troops out of Syria, which has now created a whole other issue. Where right now Mike Pence is now leading a full delegation to Turkey to try to get them to stop bombing a place in Syria that is full of people who are U.S. allies, but they are not Turkish allies because they're Kurdish. And if you ever want to be confused and frustrated by anything, just look up the history of the Middle East. I can't even get into how vast this whole issue is. It's a whole issue. But know that Mike Pence right now is probably one of Trump's most trusted people. I mean, he just got this ceasefire that isn't really a ceasefire, and that's a whole other thing I can't go into right now. I'm just trying to stay focused. But Mike Pence is really important for Trump. He has turned out to be one of his most important advisors. He takes Trump's side on a lot of things. He listens to Mike Pence. Mike Pence has kind of been a guy who honestly, really, there's been rumors that they might not like each other that much, but Trump, publicly at least, still loves Mike Pence. I mean, even in private, it doesn't seem like he really is complaining about him that much, and usually when Trump says stuff in private, usually gets back to people somehow. The next one that I should talk about is the Secretary of State. That's Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo has been Trump's right-hand person for a majority of his foreign policy. He did not get along with his first Secretary of State. That was Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson and Trump really hated each other. So he's been in here for a while. He took office in April 26, 2018. So he's now been in office for a year and a couple of months, basically. Trump's right-hand person to go to on most foreign policy issues. He obviously runs the State Department, so he is at the center of a lot of different controversies with North Korea, with China, with Russia. He is the head that really Trump turns to. I don't really know if Mike Pence is a good Secretary of State. I would say that he's kind of depleted the State Department He is one of those hardline Republicans that believes in less government spending, does not believe in the idea that diplomacy is really worth anything unless it is looking good for the president. He has really depleted the State Department, and people actually, just in the impeachment stuff we're talking about, there's a woman named Fiona Hill who was one of on Trump's national security team, I think Russian relations and things like that. But she said that, it was a diplomat who was a ambassador to Ukraine or a representative for the State Department to Ukraine, and she said that the State Department just feels depleted. And so, I mean, it really is hard to say what Mike Pompeo's impact's going to be. He's probably better off than Rex Tillerson. He at least has some. He was the former CIA director, and when Rex Tillerson and Trump really started to butt heads and he fired Rex Tillerson, Mike Pompeo was the CIA director at that point, and Trump really liked him and said, do you want to be Secretary of State? And now he's Secretary of State. So he's going to be very important over the next couple of months and years. I would definitely tell you to keep an eye on what he does. He is a hardline Republican on most things. He advocates for military strength in almost all cases. The next one is the Secretary of Treasury, and this is Steve Mnuchin. Mnuchin was the former one bank CEO, and he's now the Secretary of the Treasury. He has been in office since the very beginning, actually, and just somebody that Trump turned to. Super rich dude, believes in free market capitalism, but has also kind of taken Trump's stance. He actually, is one of Trump's right-hand people. If there's ever a sanction thing coming on a country or anything like that, Mnuchin is usually the one who announces it. It's a big deal when sanctions are announced against Russia, North Korea, anything like that. Trump turns to Mnuchin to announce those things. He has also taken the lead on certain trade issues with China, has taken the lead on talking about certain other foreign policy stuff. Mnuchin has kind of been there, has been also combating the idea that there's going to be a recession. So Mnuchin has been important for Trump and really hasn't lost faith in him. Another shocking one that he's been there since the very beginning. Mnuchin is going to be really important in terms of if there is an economic downturn, Trump's probably going to turn to him first and potentially blame him. I would tell you to look out for that. The next one is the Secretary of Defense, and this is Mark Esper. Esper is brand new. He actually just took office in July. He was the acting Secretary of Defense for a while. There was somebody else who had taken over for really the most important one is James Mattis, who was Trump's Secretary of Defense for about a year or two, and Mattis and Trump ended up having a falling out. He was a general. I can't remember what branch of the military he was a part of. But Esper has a doctorate, and he was the Secretary of the Army before he became the Secretary of Defense. Him and Trump seem to get along. I honestly don't know much about him. People were kind of surprised at this announcement. He is a career government employee. And what a lot of people were talking about was their worry at the beginning of Trump's administration was he relied a lot on generals. And generals tend to be much more forceful about certain things. But actually, funny enough, they kind of resisted some of Trump's impulses to just outright try to just go after people. And generals are very reserved. But what they were worried about is that the Defense Department would be overrun by generals and run by them. But really that hasn't happened. The Defense Department is kind of its own thing sometimes. And Esper seems to be one of those career government employees that people were looking for at the beginning. He might be just a yes man for Trump. I really don't know much about him. He's just got into office in August. He doesn't show up that much into interviews and stuff like that. Mattis was really out there in front of the camera a lot talking about stuff, but Esper, not so much. So, the next one we'll talk about is the Attorney General, and this is William Barr. Barr is also in the center of this whole impeachment thing, along with Pompeo, too. I should also mention that Pompeo has been at the center of this as well, that he potentially directed people in the State Department to work with Ukrainian officials to try to investigate Joe Biden. William Barr was also a part of that phone conversation with the Ukrainian president, and they said that Trump told him to have somebody work with William Barr, which is insane that you would ask for that in the first place and just completely against every principle of the office of president and against the office of the Attorney General. William Barr was actually the U.S. Attorney General from 1991 to 1993, and then he came back for this administration. There's been some things about William Barr that have been questionable, what he has done over the course of, hasn't been in office that long. He took office in February of this year. So he's been in there for just a little under a year, but he has been an Attorney General before, and Jeff Sessions was who Trump just really by the end of his term also hated. Barr is one of those that he's kind of under the radar too. He was brought to testify over the Russia investigation and a couple other things. He has been at the center of a lot of controversy already just from his short time in office. People really thought he was going to be kind of like a middle-of-the-road politician that somebody would bring in, but people have kind of questioned if he is just kind of like a political tool for Trump to use at times. He's much more in line with what Trump wants out of the Attorney General office. Trump seems to think that the Attorney General is his personal investigator, which is not true. It's not just somebody who just goes off and investigates things when the president says so. The Justice Department is a whole other wing of the government that is there on their own measure, and they usually investigate things that they find are really out of the ordinary. They are not usually directed by the president to investigate anything. And so far, they've held off on a lot of things that Trump wanted to investigate, including Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and a couple other things. And the Justice Department usually remains pretty apolitical. So it's a scary thing to use your Justice Department as a way to try to investigate your political opponents. It's just very odd. The other one I will mention, though, is the Secretary of Commerce. That is Wilbur Ross. The only reason why you should know about him is because he is really important in the trade negotiations with China, since he is the Secretary of Commerce. He deals with a lot of that sort of issue. He tends to take a much more hardline stance on trade, like Trump's position, which is very isolationist. It's not really about the free market and free market trade. Trump doesn't like that as much. But yes, the Secretary of Commerce is Wilbur Ross, and he has been really, really important for the Trump administration the last couple of years. Trump turns to him for a lot of stuff. The rest of them are really, honestly, no one does anything. I just look through it, and this is usually for the rest of these, those first couple of positions, those are the people that most presidents trust the most. Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Secretary of State are the ones that people turn to, and they're the most in the eye of the public. Like the Secretary of the Interior is David Benhart. Secretary of Agriculture is Sonny Perdue. Secretary of Labor is Eugene Scalia, who is Antonin Scalia's son as well, the former Supreme Court Justice. Alex Azar is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Ben Carson, who was a presidential candidate and really amazingly ignorant person just in general, he's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. The Secretary of Transportation is Elaine Chao. Elaine Chao is actually Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate. She is Mitch McConnell's wife. She's the Secretary of Transportation, but has also been the Secretary of Labor, is a career politician. So this is not just somebody who just got there because she was the majority leader in the Senate's wife. She is actually a career politician. The Secretary of Energy is Rick Perry, the former Texas governor who ran for president against Trump at one point and famously had many flubs in his time of running for president. He's run twice, I think. But he has had a surprisingly quiet time as Secretary of Energy until now, where he just got involved in the Ukraine situation as well. He might have been directed to go tell somebody about something. So this is why it's just so many people that it might happen. And then today it was just announced there's been rumors for the last couple months that he was going to leave office, and I think now he's finally resigning. I'm not sure when or how that's going to work, but it sounds like it's going to be the end of the year, maybe right away if this whole impeachment trial thing picks up. I think Rick Perry's trying to get out of Dodge right now. The Secretary of Education. This was the most controversial secretary position out of the entire Trump cabinet. She was voted Secretary of Education, and that's Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos famously had a very tough time getting through the Senate and just barely passed, and Mike Pence was her deciding vote. One of the few times that has ever happened for a secretary position. She's kind of depleted the education department, and I just don't know how they're going to recover from it. It's just been years since that has happened. I don't know. The effects of her time in the Secretary of Education position are going to be felt for many, many years. Has taken the position of trying to downgrade the ability for the protections for gay and lesbian individuals and LGBT community individuals on college campuses, protection of women on college campuses when it comes to rape or rape allegations or sexual assault. Has really tried to push against that. So I don't know. It's her time there. Like many of these people are really just depleting a lot of government power, and that, which is fine in some cases, but also not really great in others. The Secretary of Veteran Affairs is Robert Wilkie. The Secretary of Homeland Security right now is Kevin McAlean, I think. I can't even pronounce that right now. I don't care enough. He actually just fired the former Secretary of Homeland Security, and because she wasn't hard enough on the border wall, and really that was a whole thing. Christian Nielsen, I think her name was. The White House Chief of Staff. This is an interesting one. He's also the director of the Office of Budget Management, but Mick Mulvaney is his name, and he just absolutely stepped in it today. He actually went out on national television and during a press conference said that Trump had held aid for the Ukrainians in order to get them to investigate corruption, probably meaning to investigate Joe Biden. And there was a quid pro quo attached to that. This might be the most significant thing a Trump cabinet member could possibly say. This is like the equivalent if you told your mother that you killed somebody. This is like your mom going out in front of microphones and saying, yeah, they told me they did, but what are you going to do about it? That's like the equivalent. I just don't even know how to talk about it. It's just so absolutely unbelievable. He has two positions right now as White House Chief of Staff and the Director in Office of Management and Budget. He's a super hardline conservative who believes in no government spending whatsoever and tries to slash the budget every year. And regularly fails at that. Some other people, there's a U.S. Trade Representative, that's Robert Lighthizer. Lighthizer has taken a also pretty hardline stance on trade, especially when it comes to China. Right now, the acting director of national intelligence is Joseph McGuire. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency is Gina Haspel. The administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Andrew Wheeler, taking over for terrible people. Administrator for Small Business Administration is Chris Pilkerton. Many of those last people do not have to be voted in by the Senate. A lot of them are just there as a representative. So the U.S. Trade Representative, I don't think they have to be voted in. But the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of the CIA and the EPA Administrator all need to be voted in. I'm not sure about the small business one. Chief of Staff is just up to Trump and who he wants to put in there. They do not need to be confirmed by the Senate. Those are the most important people. The other people I should probably mention who are not even a part of the Trump administration, but have a fairly important role are his own children. Not just I don't count Eric and Donald Jr. They're doing their own thing. They're running their dad's business, tweeting horrible things at people. I'm not really sure what they do. The one thing we should talk about is Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, who have somehow worked their way into government roles. Ivanka tends to go to conferences to represent her dad, and somehow that represents the United States government. I don't know how, but they're the representatives. They represent our entire government, and they're not anywhere close to government officials, but I don't understand how this isn't. Like Robert Kennedy had his brother who was the Attorney General. He was Bobby Kennedy. Robert Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy worked really closely with one another. There was some instances where people thought, wow, that's nepotism. And nepotism is when you have family members or friends who obviously are not qualified for a position, but they are given that position. He had real experience in that role, but he played a really active role in the cabinet. So there was a lot of questions around that, which was probably a good choice to actually question that. But these are people who don't have any experience in government whatsoever. Ivanka Trump is not a government employee. She's not paid by the government for what I know. And it's just bizarre that she is representing us. She's not the personal representative of the president. You want a government representative, and she is not a government representative. Same thing with Jared Kushner. He has been tasked with the entire peace process of Israel and Palestine. And that's just nuts that he is in charge of that. There's been multiple instances of him kind of going around the State Department and the State Department not being in charge of that, but him being in charge of it. I just don't understand. I don't get it. And partly that is because Kushner is Jewish, and I think Trump thinks that there is some connection to Israel and like trying to get, something happening with that. But it really is just, it's bizarre. These people aren't government employees. I don't know how else to say it. I know the look on my face and my voice is way more frustrated than you guys are probably used to. And that's because it's just so vastly frustrating that we have an entire executive branch that is run by one person. And that's why when I say these people's names like they don't matter, and partially that is true, they don't. There's only one person this comes down to. I'm not even really going to talk about Trump today because y'all know where he comes from. You all know who he is. You all know what he does. He's out there in our face every day. I wish there was just one day where you didn't have to hear his name. Be really nice. I just don't even know what to say about him personally. I just don't. I think that he's a president who, just doesn't understand how to be president, what that really means. A lot of the men that we've had in our office have not been great presidents. I've disagreed with a lot of them. Disagreed with some of the directions that they were going to take. But I never felt like there was somebody who just absolutely 100% did not understand what that role was. It did not, I don't want to say we're living in a dictatorship, because we're not, because in a dictatorship, you certainly wouldn't have an impeachment process. You wouldn't have that ability to do that. You have, thankfully, our Constitution has worked up until this point pretty well, and kept us from a lot of things that could potentially happen. But I think if Trump had his way, there would be no democracy. There wouldn't be any making fun of him. There wouldn't be any of these other things. Like, if Trump really had it his way, we're lucky that we have a system of government that can protect us from certain things. I don't know how else to describe this administration. I just don't, and I'm kind of just at a loss for words for it. And it's just so frustrating. As much as I really did not agree with some stuff in the Bush administration, I mean, that was a cakewalk compared to this. You understood them and their thought process, and you didn't really agree with everything that they did, but man, like, at least like it had some sort of like central ideology. This is just no ideology. I don't even know what to say anymore. This is like going to be the saddest ending to any lecture that we have this year. I'm just so frustrated, and I don't know how else to describe it other than that. It's just frustration. So I'm just going to end it here before I start rambling more about things that frustrate me. But thank you for letting me vent. I hope that you guys got to watch my first lecture video on the executive branch. I'm hoping to do a third one. I doubt I'm going to get to it this year, where I talk about all the presidents. So it's probably going to be something that I record and save for a later date. Unfortunately, I think we're only going to have 2. Well, fortunately for you guys. And maybe I'll be able to put it up middle of the week. I talk about all the presidents, what their impact was on the office. And I think that's a really cool one to go through. I'm excited for that, but I just don't know if I have enough time to put it up. If you guys have any questions about this, let me know. I'm sorry for those who are big Trump supporters. If you're still in this class, I don't know if you are or not. But very personal stuff that I think about this. It's just very hard to digest all of it. So I appreciate you guys listening. I will be available to answer any questions you guys might have about this and talk about stuff. And I'll see what you guys think soon. So, all right, guys, I'll see you later.